My daughter told me I would eat after everyone else. She said it the way you might tell a waiter to bring more ice. No anger, no cruelty she would ever admit to. Just a small, clean instruction dropped into the middle of a crowded table. I was standing by the stove when she said it. I had a dish towel over my shoulder. My hands were still warm from the oven. The roast sat in the center of the table, browned and glistening the way I liked it. I had marinated that meat since the night before. I had been on my feet since noon. "You'll eat after everyone else, Mother," Deborah said. "There isn't enough room right now. Just wait in the kitchen. It's easier." Something cracked in me. Not loud, not sharp. It was the kind of crack you hear in old wood when the cold gets into it. A slow, quiet split. And once a thing splits like that, it does not go back together. I looked at the table. Her husband Craig was already reaching for the bread. Her son Tyler had his phone under the edge of the tablecloth. 2 of the neighbor families were there, the ones Deborah liked to impress. 12 people. Not one of them looked up at me. I looked at the roast. Then I did something I had not planned. I picked up the whole tray. It was still hot through the towel. I carried it to the front door. I opened the door with my elbow, and I walked out. No one followed me. No one called my name. Behind me I heard forks touch plates. I heard a child laugh at something. The door swung shut on its own soft as a sigh. That was all. 78 years old, and I walked out of my daughter's house carrying the main course in my arms. The night air was colder than I expected. It felt good. My house was only a few blocks away. I had lived in it for 40 years. I still owned it. I walked the whole way with that heavy pan against my chest, careful not to spill the juices that still bubbled at the bottom. My knees complained. My arms shook by the end. I did not stop. My own front door stuck the way it always did. I bumped it with my hip and it gave. Inside the house smelled like dust and lemon soap and thyme. It smelled like mine. I set the roast down on my own counter. Then I stood there in the quiet and listened to my own breathing. There were no voices, no screens, no one asking where the salt was. Just the tick of the clock on the wall, the one I had forgotten to wind for weeks. I wound it. Then I took down one of the old plates, the white ones with the little blue flowers around the edge. One of them was chipped. I chose that one on purpose. I cut myself a thick slice. I spooned the drippings over the top. I sat down at my own table in my own chair, and I ate. The meat was tender. The seasoning had gone all the way through. It might have been the best roast I ever made. No one told me so. No one interrupted me to ask for anything. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I tasted every single bite. I want you to know what that quiet felt like. For 2 years I had eaten standing up, near the sink, mostly with a plate balanced on the edge of the counter while everyone else sat down. I ate fast so I could clear the dishes. I ate whatever was left after the good pieces were gone. I told myself that was just what mothers did. That was just how it went. But sitting at my own table that night with no one waiting on me and no one talking over me, I felt like a person again. Not a helper. Not a spare set of hands. A person alone in her own house, eating a good meal she made with her own 2 hands. It is a small thing. It should not have felt so large. It did. When I finished, I washed the plate. I dried it. I put it away. Then I sat by the window in the dark and looked out at the maple trees in my yard. I used to rake those trees every fall. Deborah told me 2 years ago to stop. She said I might fall and break a hip. She never once asked if I wanted to stop. She only told me. She had always been good at telling. I sat there a long time. I thought about how I got here. My husband Gene died 12 years ago. He went in his sleep, which is more mercy than most people get, though it did not feel like mercy at the time. We were married for 46 years. After he was gone, the house felt too big and too quiet, but it was still mine and I still knew how to run it. I had run numbers my whole working life. 32 years keeping the books for a building supply company out on the highway. I balanced accounts other people could not read. I caught mistakes that saved that company more than my own salary. Nobody ever called me confused. Not once. Then Lorraine died. My younger girl. My gentle one. Lorraine got sick when she was 38. The cancer came fast and it did not play fair. She fought it for 2 years with her eyes open the whole time. She called me before every treatment. Not for advice. She just knew I needed to hear her voice, and she was right. She died at 40. That was 10 years ago now. Losing a child does something to you that losing a husband does not. It turns the world sideways. It makes you doubt your own hands. That was when I started letting go. I told myself it was grief. Maybe it was. But grief is a door, and Deborah walked right through it. She started small. A reminder to pay the light bill. An offer to handle the phone plan so I would not have to. "Let me take that off your plate, Mom," she would say. "You have enough going on." It sounded like love. It sounded like a good daughter helping her mother through the worst year of her life. And I was tired, so I let her. Little by little, the pieces of my life moved into her hands. My car went first. She said I did not need it, that she would drive me anywhere. I stopped hosting dinners. She said it was easier at her place. I stopped keeping my own calendar. She kept it for me. Each time I told myself it was only practical. Each time I did not notice the walls getting closer. I remember the day she took over my mail. She said too many scams targeted older women, that she would sort it and hand me anything important. It sounded like she was protecting me. And maybe she believed she was. That is the strange thing about Deborah. She does not think of herself as taking anything. She thinks of herself as helping. She thinks she is saving the family from mess and worry and shame. But every time she helped me, I ended up with one less thing that was mine. Then 14 months ago, I fell. It was nothing dramatic. I missed the bottom step on my back porch and went down hard on the concrete. I cracked my wrist and bruised my hip and scared myself. Deborah showed up at the hospital before I was even out of the imaging room. She was calm. She was organized. She was, I will admit, a comfort that day. She brought me to her house to recover. That part made sense. I could not cook or dress myself with one arm in a brace. And while I was there hurting and half asleep on pain medicine, she brought me some papers. "Just sign these, Mom," she said. "It's so I can pay your bills while you're laid up. So the lights don't get shut off while you can't write a check. It's just easier." Easier. That word again. I want you to understand something. I read contracts for a living. I read the fine print on other people's deals for 32 years. And I did not read those papers. I signed them because my wrist throbbed and my head was full of fog, and it was 2 days before the anniversary of Lorraine's death, and my one living daughter was standing over me telling me she wanted to help. I trusted her. That is the whole reason. I trusted her, so I did not read. I signed a power of attorney that day. I signed a second one too, a healthcare one, though I did not understand the difference at the time. I thought I was signing a permission slip to pay the electric company. Deborah tucked the papers into a folder and told me not to worry about a thing. And I did not. That was my mistake. Not age. Not weakness. I stopped reading the fine print one single time because I loved her. The 14 months after that passed in a fog of small surrenders. My wrist healed, but I never went home. There was always a reason to stay a little longer. The house needed airing out. Winter was coming. Tyler liked having me around, she said, though Tyler barely spoke to me. I became part of the furniture in my daughter's house. I cooked. I cleaned. I folded laundry. I picked the children up from school when Deborah was busy. And slowly I understood that I had not moved in as her mother. I had moved in as her help. I sat by my window that first night back in my own home and I let all of it come. I was not angry. I was tired. Tired of being spoken to like a chore. Tired of thanking people for letting me exist in a house I paid to raise them in. Tired of pretending that being useful was the same thing as being loved. The phone rang twice that night. The screen lit up with her name. Deborah. I watched it ring and I did not answer. She did not leave a message. She just called as if the sound alone might pull me back across those few blocks. It did not. After the second call, I turned the phone face down and went to bed. I slept better than I had in a year. I woke with the first gray light the way I always have. There was no child to dress. No breakfast to lay out for people who never looked up. I made myself a cup of tea and cut a slice of the cold roast. I did not heat it. I ate it standing at the counter watching the light come up over my own backyard, and it tasted even better cold. Then I made a list. Old habit. A bookkeeper always makes a list. Check the accounts. Call the bank. Go through the folders Deborah organized last spring. I did not know yet what I was looking for. I only knew that something in me had woken up, and it was counting. But before any of that, I wanted to hear one voice. I picked up the phone and dialed my granddaughter from memory. Bethany, Lorraine's girl. She was 23 now, working at the county library, living in a small apartment across town. After Lorraine died, Bethany had gone to live with Deborah. She was only 13. I had wanted to take her myself. I was told I was too old to raise a teenager. I did not fight it. I have regretted that more than almost anything. The phone rang twice. "Grandma." Her voice hit me like sunlight through a window. "Are you okay?" "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "Mom said you left last night. She said you took the roast and just walked out." She looked furious. "What happened?" I found myself smiling. "Something happened," I said. I remembered I'm still alive. There was a pause. Then Bethany laughed, soft and surprised. "Well," she said, "that's one way to put it." "Would you come by?" I asked. "I'm at my own house now. I'll make lunch. Nothing fancy." "Tomorrow," she said almost too fast. "I mean, if that's okay. I've been wanting to see you for a while." She always finds a reason it's not a good time. That sentence sat in my chest like a stone. She always finds a reason. "Tomorrow would be lovely," I said. When we hung up, I knew there was one more thing I had to do that morning. My clothes were still at Deborah's house. So were my few real belongings. If I was going to stay in my own home, I needed them back. I walked the few blocks over. Craig was at work. Tyler was at school. Deborah's car was gone from the driveway. I still had my key, so I let myself in. The house was quiet and very neat. It was always neat. Deborah kept it like a room in a catalog, every pillow in its place, nothing out of line. Standing in that clean, silent front room, I understood something. This was never my home. It was a display. And I had been part of the display the useful grandmother in the corner kept tidy and quiet like everything else. I did not take much. I did not want much. I went to the small guest room where I had slept for 14 months, and I packed one suitcase. My clothes, my good shoes, Jean's old watch, which I had brought with me the day I moved in, my reading glasses, and from the back of the closet, a shoebox I had guarded like it held gold. Inside that box were Lorraine's letters. My gentle girl wrote real letters on paper and ink right up until the end. She used to say screens lie and ink tells the truth. I had every one she ever sent me. I was not going to leave them in that house one more night. I zipped the suitcase. I set my key on the kitchen counter right where Deborah would see it. Then I carried my whole life back down the street in one bag, and it did not feel like less. It felt like enough. Back home, I walked through my house slowly. I had not really looked at it in over a year. The curtains I sewed before Deborah was even born. The lamp I refused to throw out. The bookshelf full of paperbacks nobody borrowed. My hands had made or chosen almost everything in those rooms. I dusted. I opened windows. I let the house breathe. It felt like waking someone up. That afternoon, I did the thing I had been circling all morning. I pulled down the folder from the shelf, the thick one Deborah had made when she took over my affairs. She had labeled it in her neat, slanted handwriting. House and finances. She kept everything in it. She was proud of how organized she was. I used to think that was thoughtful. I put on my reading glasses and I opened it on the kitchen table, and this time I read every page. The first pages were ordinary. Utility bills all switched into her name for convenience. Receipts. A note here and there in her writing little reminders to herself. I turned the pages slowly the way I used to work through a ledger, one line at a time, letting the numbers talk to me. And then the numbers started talking. There was a statement I did not recognize. It was from a bank I had never done business with. My name was on it, but the account was not one I had opened. It was not a checking account. It was not savings. At the top of the page, in plain black letters, were 4 words I had spent my whole career understanding. Home equity line of credit. I sat very still. A home equity line of credit is a loan. You borrow against your house. The bank gives you money, and if you do not pay it back, they can take the roof over your head. My house was paid off. Jean and I made the last mortgage payment 15 years ago. We celebrated with a bottle of cheap champagne on the porch. There was no reason on earth for my house to have a loan against it. But there it was. A line of credit opened 8 months ago secured by my home. And it had a balance. Money had been drawn out of it. Not all at once. In pieces. A little here, a little there, month after month, the way you would drain a pond so slowly no one would notice the water going down. I did what I have always done with numbers I do not trust. I got a fresh sheet of paper, and I copied them out by hand one line at a time. Old habit. When you write a number down yourself, it cannot hide from you. I wrote down each withdrawal and the date beside it, and a pattern began to show itself the way patterns always do if you are patient. The withdrawals were not random. They came in the same week each month. Late in the month, right around the time bills come due. Some were small, some were not. I did not yet know where the money went, but I had spent 32 years watching money leave one place and land in another, and I knew that money always lands somewhere. It never just disappears. Wherever this money went, it went there on purpose, and someone had signed for it every single time. I underlined the dates. I told myself I would follow every dollar. Not tonight, but soon. I looked for the signature. I knew what fields to check. I had witnessed 1,000 signatures in my life, and there on the line where the owner should sign was not my name in my own hand. It was Deborah's signature, and beside it in the small print 3 words that made the whole thing legal. As attorney, in fact, she had signed it as my agent. Under the power of attorney I gave her from a hospital bed. The one I never read. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I would have thought they might shake. But 32 years of reading other people's damage had taught me to go cold when the numbers turned bad, and they had turned very bad. I turned the page. There was more. There was a copy of the power of attorney itself, and stamped across the top corner was the mark of the Register of Deeds. It had been recorded, filed with the county d'Étendue. She had to file it, I realized, because you cannot borrow against a house on someone's behalf unless that document is on record. She had done it by the book. That was the part that chilled me. She had not been careless. She had been careful. I closed the folder. I took off my glasses. I looked out at the maple trees I was no longer allowed to rake in the yard of the house. I still owned the house that now carried a secret loan I never agreed to. I had walked out of that dinner thinking I was making a point about a roast. I thought the worst thing between my daughter and me was a rude sentence at a crowded table. I thought I was tired and hurt and ready to sleep in my own bed. I was wrong. This was not about a seat at the table. This was about the table itself and the house it sat in, and every dollar Jean and I had spent our whole lives building. The cage I had felt closing around me for 2 years was not made of worry or old age. It was made of paper, and she had been building it one careful signature at a time. I sat there until the light went gold and then gray. Somewhere across town, my daughter was probably still angry about the roast. She had no idea what I had just found. She had no idea that the quiet old woman she told to eat last had spent her whole life reading exactly this kind of page. There was a part of me that wanted to call her right then, to pick up the phone and ask her how she could do this, how she could sit me at the end of the table and tell me to eat last while she quietly borrowed against the very house I raised her in. But I have learned something in a long life. When you are angry, you talk. When you are smart, you get ready first. I had spent 2 years talking to no effect. I was done talking for a while. I got up, I found a pen and a clean notepad. I turned to the first blank sheet, and at the top I wrote one word: enough. Then I started my real list. Not chores, not groceries. The things I would do now as myself before this went any further. Call the bank, call a lawyer. Find out exactly how deep it went. My name was still on the deed. My mind was still my own. I still had power. I had just left it sitting in a folder for 14 months, and it was time to pick it back up. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. The phone rang once more. Deborah. I watched her name glow in the dark, and then I watched it fade. She did not leave a message. She would soon. I was sure of that, but not yet. Not tonight. Tonight I sat at my own table in my own house with the truth spread open in front of me, and I began very quietly to count. Bethany came the next day, just like she promised. She knocked soft on the glass, and when I opened the door, she was standing there with a brown paper bag and a nervous smile. She had her mother's eyes. My Lorraine's eyes. It caught me in the chest every time. I brought pastries, she said, from that little bakery by the library, the cinnamon ones you used to like. I still like them, I said. Come in. We sat at my kitchen table with the warm pastries between us. She poured the tea like she had watched me do it 100 times because she had. For a while, we did not talk about anything hard. We talked about her job at the library, about a stray cat that kept getting into her apartment, about nothing, which was exactly what I needed. Bethany was the only one who ever really came to see me. I understood that now. After Lorraine died, she had grown up in Deborah's house, and she had watched from the inside. She had seen how her aunt worked. Every time Bethany asked to visit me over the last year, there had been a reason it was not a good time. I was resting. I was busy. I was not up for company. Now I knew the truth. Deborah had been keeping us apart on purpose. A woman building a story does not want witnesses who love the person in it. Then she got quiet. She turned her mug in a slow circle on the table. "Grandma," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you feel okay? I mean, really? Are you forgetting things? Getting confused?" I set down my tea. "No," I said. "I feel sharper than I have in 2 years. Why?" She looked down at her hands. "Because that's not what Mom is saying." The room went still. "What is she saying?" Bethany took a breath like she had been holding this in for a while. "She's been calling people. Aunt Sue, the cousins, even old friends of yours from church. She tells them you're slipping, that you wandered off from the dinner and scared everybody, that you left your own family and walked out into the dark confused, carrying a hot pan like you didn't know where you were." I felt my face go cold. That was not what happened. I knew exactly where I was going. I walked in a straight line to my own front door. "She's telling them you can't be trusted alone anymore," Bethany went on. "That she's worried sick. That she doesn't know how much longer you can keep making your own decisions." She looked up at me. "Grandma, she cried on the phone to Aunt Sue. She made it sound like you're falling apart." I sat with that for a long moment. And here is the thing you have to understand about me. I spent 32 years reading numbers that other people arranged to tell a story. A crooked bookkeeper does not steal in one big grab. He builds a record. He makes the papers say what he wants them to say so that when someone finally looks, the lie is already written down and signed. I had caught men doing exactly that. I knew what it looked like. And this looked exactly like that. Deborah was not gossiping. Gossip is careless. This was careful. She was not telling people I was confused because she was worried. She was telling people I was confused so that later when it counted, there would be a whole chorus of relatives who would swear they had been worried for months. She was writing the story before she needed it. She was building a record. The roast, the borrowed money, the phone calls to my cousins. These were not separate things. They were all one thing. She was getting ready to take the last piece of me I still had, my own right to make my own choices. "Bethany," I said, "I need you to tell me everything you know, every call, every word you can remember." She did. She had grown up in that house after Lorraine died. She had spent her teenage years watching how Deborah worked. She knew the tone Deborah used when she was managing people. And she told me one more thing that turned my stomach to ice. "There's an appointment," she said. "I heard her on the phone with a doctor's office. She booked you a memory screening. She said it's routine. But she was very specific that she needed the results in writing." Results in writing. Of course she did. That night after Bethany went home, I did not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table under the lamp, and I did the one thing I should have done 14 months ago. I read the power of attorney. All of it. Every line. I read it the way I used to read a contract before I let my company sign it. Slowly. Twice. With a pencil in my hand. And the more I read, the worse it got. It was not a small permission slip to pay my light bill. It was the broadest kind of financial power there is. It gave her authority over my bank accounts, my property, my investments, the power to borrow money in my name, the power to deal in real estate. It was a statutory form filled out to grant nearly everything, and I had signed it half asleep on pain medicine while I grieved my dead child. There was a second document, too, the healthcare one. That one was different. That one only gave her a say over my medical care if I could not speak for myself, if I lost my mind or fell into a coma. As long as I had my wits, that paper meant nothing. She could not use it to drag me to a doctor. She could not force a single test. So the memory screening was not something she could make me do. It was something she needed me to do willingly without knowing why. She had booked it as routine, so I would walk in trusting answer a few questions on a bad day and hand her a piece of paper with a doctor's name on it. A piece of paper she could use. I understood the whole shape of it now. The borrowed money. The story about my confusion. The relatives lined up. The appointment. She was building toward one thing. She wanted a court to declare that I could not run my own life. She wanted to be named my guardian. And if she got that, it would all be over. A guardian would control my money, my home where I lived everything. I would not be a person anymore. I would be a ward. I would spend my last years asking permission to exist. I put down my pencil. I was not going to let that happen. The next morning I opened the phone book, an actual paper one I still kept in a drawer, and I looked for a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I wanted one who worked with older people who knew this kind of thing. I found a name. Nadine Halloran, Elder Law. I called and told the woman who answered that it was urgent, and something in my voice must have carried because she gave me an appointment for the very next day. Nadine Halloran's office smelled like coffee and old paper. She was younger than I expected, maybe 50, with sharp eyes and a calm way of listening. I laid it all out for her. The dinner, the roast, the folder, the home equity line of credit signed in my name, the phone calls to my relatives, the memory screening booked without my knowledge. She did not interrupt. She took notes. When I finished, she set down her pen. "Mrs. Whitfield," she said, "I have to ask you a direct question, and I need you to understand why. Do you feel that you are of sound mind? Do you understand your finances, your property, and the decisions in front of you?" "I kept books for a living for 32 years, I said. "I understand my finances better than my daughter ever will." The corner of her mouth moved almost a smile. "Good," she said. "Because here is what I think is happening, and I want you to tell me if I have it wrong. Your daughter is laying the groundwork to petition the court to have you declared incompetent so she can be appointed your guardian. The borrowing, the phone calls, the screening. That is what this looks like." "That is exactly what it is," I said. "I have watched men build records like this before. I know one when I see it." She nodded slowly. "Then we are going to move fast, and we are going to do it in the right order. And the first thing we do is turn her strongest weapon against her." "Which weapon?" "The claim that you are not competent," she said. "Right now it is just talk. So before she gets a single doctor to write anything down, you are going to get your own evaluation. A full one. From an independent physician of our choosing, not hers. If a real doctor examines you and puts in writing that you are sharp and capable, then any little screening she cooks up later means nothing. We build your shield first, then we take the rest apart." That was the smartest thing anyone had said to me in 2 years. Build the shield first. We went in order, and Nadine walked me through every step. First, the evaluation. She sent me to a doctor that week. He asked me questions. He tested my memory, my reasoning, my understanding of my own money and property. I answered every one. He wrote a report. It said in plain medical language that I was fully competent to manage my own affairs and make my own decisions. Nadine put that report in a file and told me it was now the most important piece of paper I owned. Second, the power of attorney. I signed a written revocation notarized that canceled it completely. But Nadine explained something I had not known. Because Deborah had recorded the original power of attorney with the Register of Deeds back when she borrowed against my house, we could not just tear it up. To make the revocation stick against the world, we had to record it in the same office. And we had to formally serve a copy on Deborah. So we did. We filed the revocation with the county right on top of the document she had recorded, and a copy went to her properly served so there could be no argument that she did not know. I revoked the healthcare document too. In its place, I named Bethany. When I said her name, Nadine paused. "She is young," I said. "Is that a problem?" "Not at all," Nadine said. "She is an adult. Any adult can serve. The only thing that matters is that you trust her and that she will honor your wishes." She wrote it down. "For what it is worth, Mrs. Whitfield, most people in your position would name the child who lives closest, or the loudest one. You are naming the one who actually asks what you want. That tells me a great deal." Third, the bank. Nadine explained that a bank is allowed to rely on a power of attorney until the moment they are told in writing that it is gone. So we told them. A letter went to the bank that held the home equity line with a copy of the revocation attached. It gave them formal notice. No more money could be drawn against my house. Not one more dollar. And we put them on notice that the existing balance was borrowed without my knowledge and would be disputed. Fourth, and this was the part that made me feel like myself again, we built something new. A living trust. Nadine set it up so that my house and my accounts would go into the trust with me as the trustee. That meant I stayed in complete control. I could live in my home, spend my money, change my mind, all of it. Nothing changed for me day to day, but when I was gone, everything would pass to Bethany, directly, cleanly, without a courtroom, without probate, and without Deborah able to touch a cent of it. "Here is the beautiful part," Nadine said. "Under the law, an agent under a power of attorney cannot create a trust for you or change who inherits your estate unless the document specifically hands her that power. And hers did not. So this is something only you can do, and only you have done. It is airtight." Airtight. I liked that word almost as much as enough. There was one more thing I did on my own, and I did not tell Nadine the details because I wanted to be sure before I said them out loud. I asked the bank to send me full copies of every statement on the home equity line going back to the day it opened. Then I sat at my table with my underlined dates, and I started matching them up. The withdrawals lined up with things. I could not prove where every dollar landed, not yet. But I knew Deborah's life. I knew when Tyler's private school tuition came due because I used to see the bills on her counter. I knew she had put in new floors and a remodel on her own house last spring right around the time a large chunk came out of my line. The dates fit like a key in a lock. Money left my house, and Deborah's life got a little nicer month after month. I did not have it all yet. A good bookkeeper does not accuse until the numbers are closed. But I opened a new ledger, a clean one, and I started tracking every dollar. If it came out of my house, it went into that ledger. I was going to follow it all the way to wherever it landed, however long it took. Faye from next door caught me one afternoon while I was walking back from the mailbox with another stack of statements. She was 83 and nosy in the kindest way, and she leaned on her cane and looked at me sideways. "You're busy lately," she said. "Good busy or bad busy?" "Both," I told her. She nodded like that made perfect sense. "You need anything, you knock. I don't sleep much anymore. I'm always up." Then she shuffled on. It was a small thing, but after a year of being handled, it felt good to be simply offered help with no strings and no folder attached. It took about 10 days to put all of it in place. 10 days of paperwork and signatures and drives across town. My knees ached. My hand cramped from signing. I had never felt stronger. And through all of it, Deborah did not know. That was the strangest part. She was out there building her story, calling my cousins, booking her screening, sure that she still held the power of attorney and the keys to my whole life. She did not know that piece by piece I had already taken it all back. She was playing a game that was already over. She just had not been told the score. She found out on a Thursday. I know it was Thursday because that was the day the bank called her. She had tried to draw money from the home equity line, and it was frozen, and they told her why. And within the hour, she was pounding on my front door. I opened it. She stood on my porch, her face tight and white, holding the served copy of the revocation in her fist like it had burned her. "What did you do?" she said. "I came home," I said. She pushed past me into the living room. She always walked into a house like it owed her the walls. "Don't play games with me, Mother. The bank froze the account. I got served papers from a lawyer. You revoked the power of attorney. You had no right." "I had every right," I said. "It was my name on all of it. My house, my money. My signature is the only one that ever mattered." "I have been managing your affairs for over a year," she snapped. "I have been taking care of you." "No," I said. "You borrowed against my house. You told my whole family I was losing my mind. And you booked me a memory test without telling me why." I watched her face when I said that last part. I watched her understand that I knew. "That is not taking care of me, Deborah. That is something else. And it is finished." For a moment she had no words. She had come here ready for a confused old woman. She had not planned for this. She had not planned for me to be standing in my own living room with every document in order, calm as a Sunday morning, saying no. Then she gathered herself. Her voice went cold and careful, the voice she used when she was managing someone. "You're not thinking clearly," she said. "This is exactly what I've been afraid of. You walk out of a family dinner, you cut off your own accounts. You move everything to a 23-year-old girl who works part-time at a library. Do you hear how that sounds, Mother? Does that sound like a woman who is thinking straight?" And there it was. She was not backing down. She was reciting it. She was practicing the very story she planned to tell a judge. Every choice I had made to protect myself she was going to hold up as proof that I had lost my mind. "Get out of my house, Deborah," I said quietly. She looked at me a long moment. Then she folded the papers, tucked them into her purse, and walked to the door. At the threshold, she turned back. "You'll regret this," she said. "You have no idea what you've started." Then she was gone. The door clicked shut. My hands did not shake. I had meant every word, but I would be lying if I said her last line did not follow me around the house for the rest of that day. You have no idea what you've started. For 4 days I heard nothing. No calls, no knocking. Just quiet. But it was not a peaceful quiet. It was the kind of quiet that sits in a house before a storm when the birds go still and the air turns heavy. I kept working my ledger. I kept my papers in order. I told Nadine what Deborah had said on my porch, word for word, and Nadine went very still when I got to the part about the library and the 23-year-old girl. She rehearsed that, Nadine said. She said it to you to see how it sounds out loud. Be ready, Carissa. I think she's going to file. I found out 4 days later. It was late morning. I was on the porch with a cup of tea watching my neighbor Faye shuffle past with her cane when a county car pulled up to my curb. A young deputy got out. He was polite. He asked if I was Carissa Whitfield. I said I was, and he handed me a thick envelope and asked me to confirm I had received it. I opened it right there on the porch and my tea went cold in my hand. It was a petition, filed with the clerk of Superior Court. My own daughter had asked the court to declare me legally incompetent. She had asked to be appointed my guardian, to take control of my money, my property, my home, and my body, to make every decision I was no longer, in her words, capable of making for myself. And there, listed as evidence of my failing mind, was everything I had done to save myself. Walking out of the dinner, closing the accounts, revoking her power, trusting my granddaughter. She had taken every clear-headed choice I made and dressed it up as madness. I stood on my porch in the cold morning light, and I read my daughter's sworn statement that her mother had lost her mind. She had told me I would eat after everyone else. I had walked out with the roast. And now she was going to try to take the plate, the table, the house, and the last of my name in front of a judge. I set down the cold tea. My hands were steady again. Good, because I was a bookkeeper for 32 years, and I had underlined every date in that folder, and I still had every dollar left to trace. She wanted a courtroom. She wanted a record. She had no idea what kind of record I could build. I went inside and I called Nadine. Then I called Bethany. And then I sat down at my own table in my own house, and I began very quietly to get ready. Nadine read the petition twice before she said a word. Then she set it down on her desk and looked at me over her glasses. She made a mistake, Nadine said. It doesn't feel like a mistake, I said. It feels like she's about to take everything. She filed in a hurry and she filed angry, Nadine said. Look at what she listed as proof that you've lost your mind. You left a dinner. You closed accounts she was draining. You put your estate in order for your granddaughter. Every single item on this list is a sane person protecting herself. She thinks she's showing the court a confused old woman. What she's actually showing them is a woman who woke up and took her life back. We can work with that. She explained how it would go. In North Carolina, a case like this goes before the clerk of Superior Court. It is called a special proceeding. Deborah was the one who filed, so Deborah was the one who had to prove her case. And she did not just have to nudge the court her way. She had to prove I was incompetent by clear, cogent, and convincing evidence. That is a high wall. The law does not take a person's freedom away on a hunch. The court will appoint a guardian ad litem, Nadine said. That is a lawyer whose only job is to look out for your interests and report to the clerk what he finds. Deborah probably thinks that helps her. It won't. Because when that lawyer sits down with you, he is going to meet exactly who I met. A sharp woman who knows her own business. She was right about that, too. The guardian ad litem came to my house a week later. His name was a kind, tired man near retirement, and he had clearly done this many times. He sat at my kitchen table and he asked me questions for 2 hours. He asked what year it was and who the president was and what I had eaten for breakfast. Then he asked harder things. He asked me to explain my own finances. So I did. I walked him through my accounts, my trust, my home, my monthly costs down to the dollar. I showed him the doctor's report that said I was fully competent. I showed him my ledger. By the end, he had stopped taking notes. He just listened. When he stood to leave, he shook my hand and held it a moment. Mrs. Whitfield, he said, I have met a lot of people in your chair. I will be honest with you. Most of them cannot do what you just did. I know what I'm going to write. After he left, I sat alone in the quiet and I let myself shake for the first time. Not from doubt, from relief. I had been holding myself so straight for so many days that I had forgotten I was allowed to bend. That evening I did something I had been putting off. I opened the shoebox. Lorraine's letters. I had not been able to read them since I got home. There had been too much to do. But that night I needed my gentle girl. I pulled out 3 of them and read them slowly. One was about Bethany's first piano recital, how her little hands shook before the first note, and how she beamed when it was over. One was just a list of small things Lorraine was grateful for that week. Sunlight, warm bread, a phone call from me. The third was the hard one. She wrote it after a scan, the one that told her the cancer had spread. I knew the lines before I read them. I had read them 100 times. I am not afraid of dying, she wrote. I am afraid of being forgotten. I held that letter to my chest in the lamplight. My eyes burned. "I have not forgotten you, baby," I said out loud to the empty room. "And I am not going to let anyone forget what you left behind either, because that was what this fight was really about. Not just my house, not just my pride. Bethany was what Lorraine left in this world. And I was not going to let Deborah take my estate and cut out the one grandchild who had my daughter's whole gentle heart. Whatever I had, it was going to Bethany. Not because of blood, because of kindness. Because she was the only one who ever asked what I wanted instead of telling me. I put the letters away and I felt steadier than I had in weeks. A few days later, another letter came, and this one I did not expect at all. The envelope was cream-colored, addressed in wide, looping cursive I had not seen in over 30 years. The return name stopped my heart for a beat. Loretta. Loretta had lived 2 houses down from me when the girls were small. We used to sit on her back steps drinking coffee while our children turned the yard into a battlefield. She moved away when her husband got a job out west, and we promised to write, and then life happened, and we did not. I opened it at the kitchen table. She had seen my name in a church bulletin and a notice about a memorial fund for Lorraine. She wrote that she was sorry it took her so long to find the words. She wrote about her grandchildren, her bad hip, her little dog. And then near the end, she wrote a line that undid me. I still remember the woman who danced barefoot in the rain at her own 40th birthday, she wrote. The one who said if the world is already wet, you may as well move with it. I hope you never stopped dancing. And if you did, well, it is never too late. I put the letter down and I sat very still. I had forgotten that woman. I truly had. I had buried her under years of his dinner ready, and can you watch the kids, and you are being too sensitive, Mother. But she was real. She had lived in this same body with these same hands. She danced barefoot in the rain once and did not care who saw. I got up. I went to the cabinet and pulled out an old stereo I had not touched in years and a scratched disc Bethany burned for me a long time ago. Grandma's jazz she had written on it in silver marker. I did not even know if it would still play. It crackled. Then it caught. A low, warm voice filled my kitchen, slow as honey. I did not really dance. My knees would not allow it. But I stood in the middle of my own kitchen in my socks, with no one watching and no one needing anything from me. And I swayed. Just a little. Just enough to remember. Then I turned off the music because I had work to do. A woman can dance and still keep her books. I closed the ledger that week. Every dollar. I traced all of it. The home equity line on my house had been drained of a little over $47,000, and now I knew exactly where every piece of it went. It did not go to my bills. It did not go to my care. Deborah had signed as my agent, borrowed against my home, and spent the money on herself. Tyler's private school tuition, the remodel on her own house, a car payment, a string of monthly charges for things I never used and never saw. She had turned my house into her own bank account, one careful withdrawal at a time, and she had done it while telling everyone she was taking care of me. I brought the whole thing to Nadine. The statements, the matching dates, the canceled checks, the clean ledger where every dollar left my house and landed in Deborah's life. Nadine went through it page by page, and when she finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Carissa," she said, "do you understand what you have built here?" "A record," I said. "A perfect one." She tapped the pages. When a person accepts a power of attorney, they become a fiduciary. That is a legal word, and it is a heavy one. It means they are bound by law to act in your best interest. Not their own. Never their own. They cannot use your money for themselves. What Deborah did has a name. It is a breach of fiduciary duty, and this ledger proves it. So we can defend me, I said. "We are past defending," Nadine said, and for the first time I saw something fierce under her calm. "She dragged you into court to prove you cannot manage money, and you are going to walk into that same court and prove that the only person who mishandled your money was her. We are not just going to win this. We are going to turn it completely around." The hearing was on a cold Tuesday morning. The courthouse was old, with high windows and worn wooden benches. Bethany sat beside me in a blue dress that had been her mother's. She held my hand under the table the whole time. Faye came too, all 83 years of her, in her good coat, sitting in the back with her cane across her knees. I did not ask her to. She just showed up. I will never forget that. Deborah sat across the room with her own lawyer. Craig was next to her. She did not look at me. She had brought her story, and she started telling it the moment the clerk began. Her lawyer painted the picture she wanted. A declining mother. A woman who abandoned a family dinner and wandered off alone in the dark. A woman who suddenly closed all her accounts and handed her whole estate to a girl barely out of school. He said the word confused many times. He said the word vulnerable. He put up a paper from a screening, a short one that suggested I had struggled with a few questions on some morning I did not remember agreeing to. Then he called my cousin Sue to the stand. Sue was one of the relatives Deborah had spent weeks calling. She sat up there stiff and uncomfortable, and Deborah's lawyer asked her if she was worried about my mind. Sue said yes, she was very worried. She said she had heard I was confused and wandering. Then Nadine stood up and asked her one gentle question. She asked Sue to name a single thing she herself had seen. Not heard. Seen with her own eyes. One confused thing I had done in front of her. Sue opened her mouth. Then she closed it. She looked down at her hands. The truth was, Sue had not laid eyes on me in over a year because Deborah had made sure of that. Everything she knew from Deborah's phone calls. She had nothing of her own. After a long, painful silence, Sue admitted it. She had only heard it. She had never seen a thing. Nadine thanked her kindly and sat down. The whole chorus Deborah had spent weeks building fell apart with one honest answer. I sat still and let them talk. Nadine had told me to. Let them build the whole house, she said before we knock it down. Then it was our turn. Nadine stood up. She was not loud. She never was. She simply began handing the clerk documents one after another and explaining each one in a plain, steady voice. First, the report from the independent doctor. A full evaluation done by a physician of no connection to either side, stating that I was completely competent to manage my own affairs and make my own decisions. Not a rushed screening on a bad morning. A thorough exam in writing signed. Second, the guardian ad litem's own report. The tired, kind man had written exactly what he told me he would. He found no evidence of incompetence. He found a woman who understood her finances better than most people half her age. He recommended the petition be denied. Third, Nadine turned to the real reason we were all in that room. The petitioner claims her mother cannot manage money, Nadine said. So let us look at how the money was actually managed. Not by Mrs. Whitfield, by the petitioner herself while acting under a power of attorney. And then she laid my ledger in front of the clerk. She walked through it slowly. The home equity line opened against my house. The $47,000 drawn out of it. And where every dollar went. The private school tuition in the petitioner's son's name, the remodel on the petitioner's own house, the car payment, the subscriptions. Line after line, date after date, each one matched to a bank record, each one signed by Deborah as my agent. The room got very quiet. A person who holds a power of attorney is a fiduciary, Nadine said. She is required by law to act in the principal's interest and never her own. The records show the opposite. The petitioner did not protect her mother's money. She spent it on herself, and now she has asked this court to hand her even more control over the very woman she was quietly draining. I watched Deborah's face while Nadine spoke. I watched the color leave it. She had walked in there so sure. She thought she was bringing a confused old woman to be managed. She had forgotten one thing. She had forgotten that the confused old woman kept books for a living for 32 years. She forgot that I could read a page of numbers better than she could ever arrange one. Her lawyer tried to object. He tried to say the finances were a separate matter, but the clerk had already seen it. You cannot unsee a page like that. Deborah's lawyer had one card left. He asked to question me directly. He thought, I suppose, that if he could rattle me in front of the clerk, he could still paint the picture he needed. So I took my seat, and I folded my hands, and I let him try. He started slow. He asked me the date. I told him. He asked me where I lived. I told him, and I gave him the address and the year I bought the house and the name of the street behind it. He asked me why I walked out of the family dinner. I said because my daughter told me to eat after the guests like hired help in a house I paid to raise her in, and I decided I would rather eat with dignity in my own home. A few people in the back of the room made a sound at that. The clerk did not stop them. Then he tried to trip me. He asked me to explain right there how a living trust works. Sure, I would stumble. So I explained it. I told him I was the trustee, which meant I kept full control while I lived. I told him my granddaughter was the beneficiary, which meant she would inherit when I was gone without probate. I told him the exact value of what was in it. I did not stumble once. When he asked how I could possibly manage such things at my age, I told him I managed larger books than my own for 32 years, and I never once let a number get past me, including the $47,000 his client took. He had no more questions. He sat down. I stayed calm the whole time, and calm was the most powerful thing I owned that day. The clerk did not take long. She looked over the doctor's report and the guardian ad litem's report and my ledger. Then she looked at Deborah, and then at me, and she made her ruling. The petition to declare me incompetent was denied. The evidence did not come close to the standard the law required. There would be no guardian. No one was going to take my freedom. I would remain exactly what I had always been, a woman in charge of her own life. And there was more. Because of what my records showed, Nadine had filed a second action of our own, a demand that Deborah account for every dollar she spent under that power of attorney and pay it back. The clerk ordered it. Deborah would have to open her books to the court, prove where the money went, and restore what she took. The house that she had quietly borrowed against would be made whole again. The court could place what the law calls a constructive trust over the money she misused, which is a fancy way of saying the law would reach into her hands and take back what was never hers. I did not cheer. I did not cry. I just breathed. For the first time in a very long time, all the way down to the bottom. Deborah caught me in the hallway afterward. Bethany started to step between us, but I touched her arm and she let me pass. Deborah's face was not cold now. It was cracked open. "You humiliated me," she said, "in front of everyone, your own daughter." "No," I said. "You did that, the day you signed my name to a loan and spent it on yourself. I only wrote down what you already did." "So that's it," she said. "You're done with me." I looked at her a long moment. My daughter, a woman I had fed and clothed and worried over for 54 years. And I felt no hatred, just a deep, quiet tiredness, and under it something almost like pity. "No," I said. "I am not done with you. You are still my child, and I will not pretend otherwise. But I am done living under your thumb. You are going to pay back what you took, not because I want your money, because you need to learn that my name is not a thing you get to spend. And when that is finished, if you ever want to sit at a table with me again, it will be my table, and you will not be telling me when to eat." She had no answer for that. For once in her life, Deborah had nothing to manage. She turned and walked away down the long hall, and I let her go. Bethany drove me home. Neither of us said much. When we pulled into my driveway, she turned off the car and just sat there. "You were incredible," she finally said. "Grandma, you took her whole plan and turned it into her worst day." "I was a bookkeeper," I said. "We are more dangerous than we look." She laughed, and it was Lorraine's laugh, and my whole chest ached with love. The weeks after were quiet in the best way. The trust was finished and solid. My house was mine free and clear again, the loan being unwound dollar by dollar, as Deborah paid it back under the court's eye. My healthcare directive named Bethany, so that if I ever could not speak for myself, the one person who always asked what I wanted would be the one deciding. Everything was in order. Everything was mine. I settled into a life I had not lived in years. I woke with the light. I made small meals just for me and ate them at my own table on a real plate. I baked 2 muffins instead of a dozen. I read books in the afternoon and let the same sentence sit with me as long as I liked. Faye and I took slow walks around the block and complained about our knees. I wrote Loretta back a long letter and told her yes, I was still dancing in my socks in my kitchen, and it was never too late. One evening, Bethany came for dinner. We made soup together, moving around each other in the small kitchen like we had done it all our lives. When it was ready, we sat down and she closed her eyes over the first spoonful. "This is perfect," she said. "It is just soup," I said. "No," she said. "It's yours. That's the difference." After we ate, I got up and went to the drawer where I kept my important things. I took out a small envelope and a single key, a copy I had made of my own front door. "This is for you," I said, and I pressed them into her hand. "The key is so you can come whenever you want. This is your home, too, for as long as I am in it. And the letter is for later. It tells you where everything is, what I want. It is all going to you, sweetheart. You never once tried to manage me. You just met me where I stood. That is love. That is what I am leaving you. Do not ever let anyone teach you otherwise." She could not speak. She just held the key in both hands like it was made of gold, and she cried, and I held her while she did. That night after she left, I turned the jazz back on, low and warm. I stood in the middle of my kitchen in my socks, and this time I did more than sway. I turned once, slow and careful, my hand out as if someone were holding it. Jean, maybe. Or Lorraine. Or just the woman I used to be, the one who danced barefoot in the rain and did not care who saw. I had spent years being told to sit down, to rest, to stay out of the way, to eat after everyone else. And I had almost believed it. I had almost handed over the last of myself, one easy surrender at a time. But I remembered who I was. A woman who built a home. A woman who kept the books. A woman who raised 2 daughters and buried one and still got up in the morning. A woman whose name meant something and who finally decided it was not for anyone else to spend. So if you are listening to this and you have ever felt small in a house you helped build, if you have ever been told to be quiet in a life you once led out loud, let this be the thing you needed to hear. You do not need anyone's permission to come back to yourself. You do not have to wait until you are treated right to know that you deserve it. Your worth was never up for a vote. You just have to begin. So begin now. And if this story found its way to you tonight, share it with another woman who needs it. Somewhere out there, she is standing at the edge of her own kitchen, holding a plate waiting to eat last, and she has forgotten that the whole table was always hers.